Hey guys, it's Chris again, just down here in the basement. Thought I'd do another video for you guys. Haven't done anything in quite a good while. Haven't had any good content out, but finally have a little time this spring. And I'm finally getting around to doing a little setup on my own personal Evoke 31 that I just got in about a week ago from PSE. I did a review back in the fall when all the new bows came out, and I shot this bow a dozen times maybe, but didn't really get to do a full tune. So finally thought I would do one and just go over my initial setup and my initial thoughts and a couple things that I found that might be helpful to some guys. So without making the video too long, let's jump kind of into that, and hopefully this will help some of you guys that are interested in the Evoke 31. I'm just going to run over my setup real quick. I am shooting a Bee Stinger Elite. I have 6 ounces of weight on the back bar and only 1 ounce on the front. I don't have my sight on here yet, so I don't know what the exact balance is going to be, but it's going to be really close to being that. The bow balances really nicely. Limb driver Pro V's on all my bows. They're really easy to set up. They really get along well with these Evolve cams too. This bow is set at 68.5 pounds. It's on the 28.5 inch module, which comes out to 28.75 on my draw board, which is exactly my draw length. I'm a little over a 28.5. So I didn't have to make any adjustments to the cables on this bow or the bowstring to get the draw length right. That's one thing I like about these 90% modules, that you can adjust this on the back side of the module. On these new PSE Evolve cams, you can adjust the let off, which you can actually minutely adjust your draw length too. So that's a really nice feature of this bow. So I had to make no adjustments. So I don't think I'm going to change out the factory strings on this bow. I think I'm going to leave it as is and just go from there. One of the things that I wanted to touch on, and the reason I wanted to make the video, is because of the center shot on these bows. And I haven't really read what a lot of people are finding for the center shot. I knew when I had this bow in my hand a few months back that the center shot wasn't going to be a normal 3/4 of an inch or 13/16, which is probably the most common setup on any bow. And it's probably because of this cutout riser here. Hopefully it focuses in on this and you can see this. It's a pretty good cutout in this riser. And when I saw that, rather than trying to measure it with a set of calipers, which is what I normally do, I kind of thought I would just go old school and just eyeball it, which is a lot of people still eyeball their center shot and then adjust from there. That's something you might find in a shop. So I said, well, let's just eyeball it. And there's 3 methods that I like to use when I eyeball a center shot. The most common one is probably just to eyeball it right down the middle of the limb bolts. That's not always the easiest thing to do because you can't see the bottom limb bolt, so you just have to kind of guess. The stabilizer hole runs dead in the middle of the riser, so that actually helps. If you lay an arrow, it'll run right down the stabilizer on this bow. So I did look at that. Another one that you can do that's real common is to lay an arrow flush against this riser and make the 2 run parallel. So I checked that. And then lastly, the one that I like to do too, which is really old, is to kind of get from behind the bow and lay the bowstring in the front of this cam track here and line up the arrow when it's raised on your rest, and just kind of get a visual reference. And you'll be able to see if the arrow is to one side of the bowstring in that cam track. So I did all 3 of those methods, and I came up with the center shot on this bow is exactly 1 inch. And I haven't really seen anyone write that it's that large, but I'm pretty confident that that's right down the middle of the bow. So that's where I left it. I started out shooting this bow at a 1 inch center shot, and I'm shooting gold tip Velocity Pro 300s, the 001 Pros. And when I shot it, had a very small left hair, probably 2 or 3 millimeters. So it was really nice not to have any type of big tear right out of the gate. On the up and down, the vertical, I started with the nock, with the arrow dead in the middle of the burger hole, and the nock height 1/8 of an inch high, which is where I start all my Evolve cam bows. I don't start them level. I start normally with the nock about 1/8 of an inch high, and I had to make 0 vertical adjustments. One thing that was nice is when I put the bow on the draw board, the top cam was ahead of the bottom cam about 1/16 of an inch, which is not a large margin. And I get a lot of messages, guys asking me, what do you do when that's the case? When one's a little bit ahead, and then you make a half a twist, and then the bottom's ahead, or vice versa. And that's just something that you have to not worry about. It's such a small amount that you don't want to even try to get that out. If you had a hybrid cam bow, you might can make a half a twist on just one yoke, and it might fix it. But when you just have two cables on a binary, and it's that small amount, it's almost not worth worrying about. Just I like to leave the top ahead rather than the bottom. So it was a slightly ahead, and I left it there, and it still shot great, and there was no vertical adjustment I had to make. So that was really easy. So I literally just knocked it 1/8 inch high, set the center shot at 1 inch, shot it through paper, and I had about a 2 or 3 millimeter left tear in my shaft. So rather than trying to shim this bow, which I wouldn't normally shim one for that small of a mount, or even move the cable guard, I just move the rest just like you normally would. The first thing that I normally do, if it's within reason, I normally don't have a problem going a 1/16 or even maybe an 1/8 inside or outside of center shot, as long as it's not too crazy. And so I just moved the rest in a little bit, and it shot a bullet hole through paper. I haven't done any long range testing yet, but I feel confident that it's going to be pretty good at that setting, and I'm not really going to have to do much more tuning on the bow. If I do, then I'll probably go to the cable guard and move it in and out a little bit and clear it off rather than have the shim. One thing PSE did for these new Evokes is they put this 1/4 inch axle in these bows, and that seems to be really helping a lot on the lack of shimming that's required. These cams are shimmed all the way over to the left, so there's not a lot of room to move anyway. If you wanted to actually play with it, one easy thing to do would just be put stiffer limbs on one side, but that obviously would require some money. So there's not a lot of shim difference in this bow, a lot of room to move it, which is fine because I didn't have to. So I did IBO the bow, shot it through my chronograph. I'm getting it right at 342 is the IBO speed. I'll go over the specs again. This bow's 68.5 pounds, 28.75 draw length, a 440 grain arrow, shot 295 feet per second, which is really fast. I mean, that's really a good speed for a nice medium weight hunting arrow. To shoot almost 300 feet per second is really good. It's about 7 feet per second faster than my Carbon Air 34s, which is probably my favorite bow of all time. I'm still holding on to those from a couple of years ago. They shot about 334, 335. So this bow's a good bit faster. It does have a little stiffer draw than the Carbon Air 34s, and it's just because the axle is shorter and these shorter limbs. The speed has to come from somewhere. So the draw is a little stiffer on this bow. Both bows are set at 68.5. The Carbon Air is at 69. And it's a little smoother. It's a little bit different draw cycle. This one seems to be consistent all the way back. The Carbon Air kind of falls off really, really nice at the end. It doesn't dump. It just has a really nice transition. But this one's pretty consistent all the way back. So thought I'd shoot a shot through paper just to let you guys see how well the bow's shooting just after a really, really easy setup on these bows. I think a lot of people have given praise to these Evokes this year just because PSE made some good updates over the Evolve bows from last year, and we'll see what it does. I'm going to move the camera back just a little bit so I can back up, and don't want to shoot from right up next to it. We'll go from there. I'm going to mention one thing. Hopefully you guys can see this on this bear shaft. It says BS number 1, and that means bear shaft 1. I label all my bear shafts just because they all shoot differently. This is the most consistent one I have, so this is the one I do most of my testing with. As I said, these are Gold Tip Velocity Pros. These are 001s, and a lot of guys are familiar with Nock Tuning. And anytime you want to tune a bow, especially if you're going to shoot bear shafts, you want to make sure you spin the nock around in all directions to see how the arrow reacts, because it can go different directions if it's not a very consistent shaft. But this is the really nice one. I can spin this nock around and it shoots good in every position. So if you're going to do bear shaft tuning, always make sure you have more than one shaft that you use just for consistency purposes. So let's take a shot in this piece of paper here. Again, I haven't backed up really too far. I normally start at about 5 feet and see what's going on right out of the bow, and then make any adjustments as I move back. Take a look at that. I've shot it through paper a good bit, so I know it's a pretty good hole. So that's my short video on the Evoke 31. If you guys have any comments or want to go over setup questions, be sure to leave it in the comments. Hope everyone has a good weekend. Thanks.